Hey geeks and gamers, and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to build an awesome all AMD PC on a budget. I'm excited, and I hope so are you. Let's get cracking. Roll the intro. Okay, let's go. So we start with the heart of our new system. That will be the CPU. It's this one, Ryzen 5 5500. We're on a budget, and this is the king of budget on AMD's side. The AMD 5500 is currently AMD's cheapest 6-core 12 threads Zen 3 based CPU. It has a base clock of 3.6 GHz and a turbo boost clock of 4.2 GHz. Although this is lower than the 5600 series of AMD CPUs, the 5500 only costs €160, including the AMD stock cooler. With a 65-watt TDP rating, we will be totally fine with that solution. One downside of that CPU is the fact that it only has 16 MB of level 3 cache compared to the 32 MB of the 5600X. Furthermore, it only supports PCI Express Generation 3. One alternative would have been the 5600 Non-X, but at a price of €200 it was out of question for this budget build, and the small uplift in performance would not have justified to pay $40 more. Next up is the graphics card. We're going with an RX6600. At just around €370, the 6600 is a bargain. The more powerful 6600 XT still was almost $450 when I got this one. The 6500 XT was totally out of the question with its 4GB of VRAM. For 1080p gaming on high settings and future-proofness, we at least want the 8GB. Not only is this the perfect card for 1080p gaming, it also only draws around 130 watts. This sure is an energy-efficient beast. With regard to the mainboard, we want something solid with lots of bells and whistles, but good price performance, and we're going with a B550M Pro 4 from ASRock. At $95, the ASRock B550M Pro 4, what a name, offers a good price performance for a micro ATX board. Its 6+2 power phase design easily delivers enough punch for our Ryzen 5500. You can even upgrade to something like a 5800X or even a 5900X later on, if you do not plan on heavy overclocking. It offers two M.2 slots for storage, one M.2 Wi-Fi slot, and two PCI Express by 16 slots. Of course, only the main one is fully populated with 16 lanes. The second one only features 4 lanes. Although the main slot is capable of PCI Express 4.0, it will be limited to Gen 3 by our Ryzen 5500. The mainboard also offers 4 DDR4 slots, allowing up to 128 GB of RAM to be installed. It also supports modules with a maximum speed of 4,733 megatransfers per second. We also find plenty of rear I/O available on this motherboard. Besides the gigabit LAN, HD audio and video out options for AMD's APUs, we have nothing short of 8 USB ports available. 2 USB 2.0 ports and 4 USB 3.2 Generation 1 ports alongside 2 USB 3.2 Gen 2 ports, one of them USB-C. Okay, to power all those components we need a power supply, and we're going with this one. It's from EVGA. I always go with major brands. It's semi-modular and really good. Freeze frame, I forgot to mention the price. It was $60. RAM-wise, I put in my to-go memory, 16 GB of Corsair Vengeance LPX memory, featuring 3200 megatransfers per second with a cache latency of 16. The memory costed around $70. For storage, I went with the A400 Kingston 480 GB SATA SSD. Nothing special, but cheap at only €50. Okay, and here we go, we're ready to build. The case. It's a Be Quiet Pure Base 500DX in white. As for the case, this thing is amazing to build in and has amazing build quality. The tempered glass side offers a great view into the machine, while the other side panel has full noise dampening. Almost all parts of the case are accessible by just removing thumb screws. The case ships with 3 140mm Be Quiet fans pre-installed, plus addressable RGB at the front and inside the case. Best thing? You can switch between the different colors and modes with a switch of a button on the case, or connect the ARGB header to the mainboard and control the lighting via the mainboard software. Furthermore, the case offers pre-installed slide-in dust filters at the bottom and front, accompanied by a magnetic dust filter at the top. As for the front I/O, there are 2 USB 3 ports, one of them a 3.1 Type-C port and the default audio jacks. With regard to the price, the case was only €95. Unfortunately, I could not start building straight away. Checking the ASRock website, I figured out that I would need a BIOS update in order for the board to recognize the Ryzen 5500. So I quickly put this test bench together, just the mainboard on its box, power, 1 RAM stick and an old AMD 4750G CPU, which should work even with the old BIOS version. As this is an APU, no additional GPU was required. So I managed to get into the BIOS, I plugged in a USB stick with the latest BIOS version and cranked up the Instant Flash utility. This is sped up video footage, the actual update takes several minutes. Some minutes later I was back in the BIOS. Don't forget to give the system some time when putting together an AIM-4 platform and booting it up for the first time, or after a BIOS update. The arrow LEDs kept blinking kind of randomly and the system rebooted several times. The motherboard is, so to say, initializing stuff like memory clocks, speeds, latency and CPU precision overdrive stuff and whatever, according to the installed hardware. This will always occur when you change the CPU or RAM, or like in this case, update the BIOS. So make sure to give the system some time to recover and figure out that stuff. Do not turn off or start picking apart the PC unless the error reporting LEDs are in a stable state, like lit up constantly and nothing else is happening anymore, okay? Good. Patience is the key. Okay, with the BIOS update out of the way, it's time to build. Let's do it. Okay, everything is put together and set up nicely behind me. Windows 11 is installed. It's time to put the system through its paces. Let's test the performance. Let's take a look at power consumption and noise levels. Okay, let's get cracking. First up is 3D Mark, the Time Spy benchmark. As you can see, the graphics score is under 8,000 points. It should be around 8,300 to 8,400, so why is it so low? Yeah, there's one caveat to the system. The 6600 only utilizes 8 lanes of the PCI Express slot and expects PCI Express Generation 4 for full performance. But due to the Ryzen 5500, we are limited to PCI Gen 3. So we just lost around 7% of performance in this benchmark. In games, this loss can go from like 2% to 8%, depending on the game and engine. Is it measurable? Yes. Will you probably notice it in-game? No, very unlikely. Next up is Cinebench R23. The Ryzen 5500 manages to score 10,338 points. For comparison, the 5600X, also a 6-core 12-thread CPU with more cache and higher boost clocks, scores around 11,400 here. That is roughly a 10% higher CPU score, but for 60 euros more, selling at 210 euros. That is an uplift in price of 30% compared to the 5500 for just 10% more performance. I think you can see why I picked the 5500 for this budget build, right? Time for gaming benchmarks. All these are performed at 1080p. Shadow of the Tomb Raider, still a great looking game and a nice kickoff. With 100 FPS average on the highest preset, the Ryzen 5500 in conjunction with the AMD 6600 GPU handled this game like a champ. We are 99% GPU bound, so the CPU is not a real limiting factor here and should also work nicely with more powerful GPUs. Nothing else to see here, so let's move on. Red Dead Redemption 2, a title that pushes CPU and GPU likewise. I always leave the game at the default balanced preset, so to say that performance versus quality, that slider, is left in the center. With an average of 81 and a maximum FPS of 114, we are all good to run the game smoothly all day long. Especially with a minimum FPS never dropping below 60 FPS. Next up is a very recent title, Assassin's Creed Valhalla. I chose the ultra-high preset at 1080p, hoping for the best. And our budget all AMD PC delivered. I'm not sure where that minimum FPS of 37 came from. I did not notice any stutters in the benchmark or when I played the game, but with an average of 72 FPS and a max of 185, you can easily have a smooth Viking experience on this machine. Now for the latest and greatest. Cyberpunk 2077 version 1.5. As you can see, I chose the Ultra preset and ran the built-in benchmark. With an average of 55 FPS, we are below that magic 60 FPS number. Although this is not a competitive shooter, it's a single-player title, so it should be fine. And honestly, the game felt really smooth, especially as I use a FreeSync monitor. But what about a little trick to boost the performance like Fidelity FX Super Resolution, which is supported in Cyberpunk? As we can use it, we should use it, right? So I activated it on the ultra quality preset, leaving the rest of the graphics settings set like before. And wow, that worked really well. We have now an average of 78 FPS. That is an uplift of like 40%. And honestly, I could not spot a difference in the graphics quality. Good job, AMD. Okay, enough benchmarking. Let's talk about power consumption. As you can see, idle, we are at about 40 watt. Running Cinebench, maxing out the CPU load, we end up at about 110 watt. Under gaming loads, or stuff like 3D Mark, we average out at around 190 watt, and under a full load, which is running Cinebench plus the Haven benchmark in the background, we end up with a total power draw of 225 watt. Now you might understand why I picked a power supply with only 650 watt. It is more than enough and even allows for future upgrades. Okay, let's take a look at the noise levels under certain workloads before we come to the final verdict. Idle, the PC reaches around 33 decibel. 30 is considered quiet, so a good result. Running Cinebench and torturing the CPU with a 100% workload results in around 39 decibel, while gaming only reaches a maximum of 36 decibel. Pushing GPU and CPU to 100% maxes out the noise at around 40 decibel. So you can see the stock CPU cooler seems to be the troublemaker with regard to noise in the system, as the GPU barely adds to the noise levels. Okay, time for the final verdict. At €900, this system delivers quite a punch. It handled anything I threw at it on high or ultra presets at 1080p like a champ. The case is great to build in and the system runs very quiet, while the power consumption is surprisingly low. Great job, AMD. With a 6-core 5500 you have plenty of power for work or gaming, and the RX6600 is a power-efficient price-performance beast. I really enjoyed this build and I hope you enjoyed the video. I look forward to install Linux on this system in the next video and try to set it up for gaming with Steam and Proton. So do not forget to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you don't miss out on that. That's it for today, lads. Stay safe. Alpha over and out.